Communications and Design, Multimedia 110. I'm Professor Curtis Stage, Los Angeles Mission College. Today's lecture is going to be on the visual language of film. So we've talked about photography already and kind of its impact. And of course, film and movies and TVs, they're such a huge part of our culture, part of our kind of consciousness. And of course, this lecture cannot span the history of filmmaking. We're not going to do that. But I want to talk about what is important about film visually and how it communicates to us visually. Not necessarily what movies are about in general or the history of movies, but really how it communicates on a visual way and connects to what we're talking about in visual communications. So movies use two main forms of communication, right? Sound and verbal and visual. So we're going to talk about the visual part. And when we talk about the visual part of films or movies or even television shows, good ones, we're talking about something called mise en scene. So mise en scene is a French term which means placing on the stage. So it's an arrangement of everything that appears in the frame of a film shot. So setting, lighting, props, costume, makeup, actors, hair, all that stuff. So one of the most important elements is in the film is the essential look of the film that you're making. And since we're a visual society, we rely on the visual representation or presentation of the film being diverse and inspiring to keep us invested in watching it. And the frame and camera work are also considered part of mise en scene. And we won't really talk about camera work and composition. Composition, we've already, I think that's pretty much part of kind of the principles and elements of design. So a lot of those things apply. So we're going to talk about things that besides the camera work and framing, we could certainly have a whole lecture just on those in film and cinema. So placing on the stage, right? What that really means is placing on a screen, because we don't place anything on a stage anymore. And the director of a movie is in charge of deciding what goes where, when, and how, right? So usually, get the Oscars and the Best Picture, right? And the reason why the director wins that award is they're at the helm of the movie. Certainly, there's a whole crew of people that are involved in creating a film. And you think that, probably the cinematographer, since we're talking visually, would be the most important part. Cinematographer is the person who's in charge of what the camera sees and where the camera's placed and the camera movement. But there's so much more than just the cinematography in a film, and that's why the director is kind of the ringleader or the master of the whole film, because not only are they working with the cinematographer to set up the shots and the compositions, but they're working with the actors, they're working with the set directors, they're working with the set designers, they're working with costume and makeup, everything that goes into the visuals of the film. And of course, they're working the blocking of the actors and moving them around. So director's job is kind of like the ringleader, circus leader of the whole thing. All of these things that go into making a movie, and directors in charge of all of them, they've formed over the years a complex visual language that really is part of visual communications. So let's look at some of those things. And, as a development of modern day technology, right, where we have such advanced technology in film, as that and the beginning of production of early Hollywood films, mise en scene grew more complex. As that was growing, mise en scene grew, right? So the more we could do on film, the more, as the technology went, so did the mise en scene. So that grew and got more complex and expanded its horizons in all aspects. And some of the earliest examples of mise en scene caught on tape were just made up of scenes, right? I mean, some of the early films, and if you've taken a cinema history class, there's people, just workers doing mundane tasks. People would go watch these early films. They had no story to them. People waiting for the train, just simple, everyday, mundane things. But they were the first examples of the things that were placed in front of the camera. So mise en scene, right? Placed on the stage. So as film industry began to grow, sets replaced the everyday environment and costumes and makeup began to become more influential and help grow film from an average everyday home videos to a great empire of visual pictures. And here's two examples here. Metropolis was an early silent film, one of the most amazing films ever shot. There's no, nobody's talking in this movie. It's all visual, so you can really get a great idea by watching that. And then The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, another silent film. There is music, obviously. There's orchestration, soundtrack, but and by the way, these early films, the orchestras were played live in the theaters while the moviegoers were there. So you would hear the music live from an orchestra. It was pretty crazy. Could you imagine doing that? Like seeing Star Wars and having John Williams, like the whole orchestra, like the LA Philharmonic playing live during watching Star Wars. It'd be crazy. It'd be great. Here's two examples. These were, very complex visual films. These weren't just people waiting for the train. These had stories to tell, and they were all told through visuals. There was actors, and they were acting, but everything they did was through their facial expressions. In some ways, the acting, it looks kind of cheesy to us now, but in some ways the acting was more difficult then because they couldn't speak the way we normally speak. They had to speak through their emotions. They had to speak through, the visuals, just purely visuals. Part of one of your things that you've got to do for this module is you're going to be watching the first 3 minutes of Orson Welles' Citizen Kane, one of the greatest films of all time. And the first 3 minutes it's just all visuals. And then the movie, starts and gets going, but it tells the initial story of Citizen Kane, of Kane. It tells this story. You see him as an old man. He's on his deathbed. And it's all, there's no dialogue at all. So you're going to be watching that, and that'll kind of feed into our discussion for this module. You can consider this. So anyway, you can consider it a visual style. And if you take all the specific visual factors that make a shot beautiful or sad or scary, right, you can take all those together. And that comprises sort of a visual language. So in other words, how the film conveys its individual visual language to give the viewer information as it's telling its particular story. That's what we want to think of mise en scene. Think of each shot as an individual photograph that has the possibility of projecting a large amount of meaning. This is from The Exorcist, one of the scariest movies. This movie's terrifying. I don't know if you've never seen the original Exorcist, it's crazy. And I don't like scary movies. I'm going to be honest with you. This one was very difficult to watch. And I watched it when I was a kid. I think I had nightmares for years. When you're creating this, these scary scenes in a horror film, it's really important, the visuals that you're creating, that it can't just be what the characters are saying or even what they're doing, but the lighting and so not the sound. Forget about that because we're talking about visual communications, but the lighting and the shadows on the wall. See, this is a big shadow on the wall behind the priest. We've got the main character, Linda Blair's character, the kid. She's hovering over this bed during this exorcist. The lighting on her, incredible. I mean, it's not natural lighting from that room. It's, it just creates this crazy. If you saw this scene, you would, it would affect you visually, and it would hit you deeply. It's not, so it doesn't even matter what they're saying or what the sounds that are coming out. It's just visual. You could watch it with no sound on, and you would be affected by it. So let's talk about some of the terms. So employing this concept of mise en scene is French, right? So you got to say mise en scene. And the correct use of its terms is the key to successfully understanding film and what it's trying to convey and its visual communication. So we're going to talk about some terms. That's what's going to kind of help us here is the terms. So the first set of terms are going to be setting and set and location. And those all kind of go together, right? So set and location are two types of setting. So the setting is the place and time which the events of a film occur, right? They're used to transport the viewer to like a specific location or a time period to accurately portray a story being told, right? You gotta, as a filmmaker or storyteller, you gotta tell this story and to accurately do that, your set has to be believable, or it has to transport you to this story. So if you look at like a film like Edward Scissorhands or Coraline, these sets have to transport us. Now, Coraline's an animated film, and Edward Scissorhands looks animated. If you've never seen Edward Scissorhands, right, Johnny Depp, it's a Tim Burton movie, fantastic. It transports you to this place that doesn't exist, but it has to feel real. And so the setting is really important. It sets the tone or the feel for the movie. The Edward Scissorhands is this dark drama comedy about this lonely kid. It's a love story. It's kind of a growing up, somewhat of a Pinocchio type story. But what's funny or great about this is that it's set in this super 1950s nuclear family style setting. And that picture that you see is kind of one of the early shots in the movie where you get this kind of helicopter tracking shot going down the street where all the cars that are brightly colored pulled into their brightly colored homes. Everybody gets home from work at the same time. It's just this very kind of saccharine, weird space. Too perfect, right? And then you get this kid, Edward, who's this kid that has scissors for hands, and he's just the weirdo, right? He doesn't fit in, and he certainly doesn't fit into this world. But Tim Burton had to set up this world that he doesn't fit in, and it had to be the opposite of what his character is. So sometimes set or setting can be could support a character, or it could show how the character doesn't fit in to the place. So that's something I want you to think about too. Coraline, great movie, and similar thing. It's this kind of scary-ish type movie and about this family, and the set is so important. The house that they live in is kind of a character in the film. So again, it transports the viewer to a world, right? And it makes us a participant in the story, right? As we're kind of a third-party witness in some ways. So that's the setting. A set is within the setting, and it's a constructed space. So here's this is from Rear Window, a famous movie by Alfred Hitchcock, one of the great filmmakers of our time. He made many great movies. You've probably heard of Psycho. That's probably the movie you've heard of, or Vertigo, right? Those are famous movies, but you might not have heard of Rear Window. It's my favorite of his North by Northwest. So he made some of the great movies of the last 100 years. And Rear Window is one of my favorites. And what's great about Rear Window is the whole movie takes place in this set. The whole movie. You never leave this set. And in fact, the majority of the movie takes place from a room looking into this set. So you're seeing the set right here. This set was built on a soundstage. The first sets were normally outdoors, right? If we're talking about theater way back when, if we're talking about the original mise en scene, we're talking about Greek, theatrical plays and whatever. These were outdoor sets. And then in Hollywood, their first sets in the first big Hollywood movies were all outdoor sets that were built. And later they were built on sound stages, and we have many of those in Southern California, right, in the Los Angeles area. And they were constructed sets on a soundstage. And this movie, Rear Window, this was a constructed set on a soundstage. It looked like a real neighborhood. I mean, when you watch the movie, you have no idea that this isn't a neighborhood, a real neighborhood in New York. In modern cinema, the continuing use of sound stages, we still use them. Constructed sets, as well as now in the last, I want to say since the 1970s, maybe late 60s into the 70s, since then, actual locations for filming, which helps establish kind of an authentic feel, right, to a movie, that those started happening in the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, yes, things were shot on location before that, but majority of things were shot on set. So the setting was built on a set. What would that mean for something to be built on set? Why would that be important? Well, you have a lot of control on a set, right? If you're on a soundstage and you have control over the lighting, the weather, everything, right? You can shoot at midnight and make it look like daytime because you have total control of that set. So visually you can communicate whatever you want at whatever time you want. So really great. Sets sometimes are virtual. So now with our technology that we have today, right, with the use of digital technologies to create CGI virtual worlds that are made on a computer, you have, you could pretty much shoot just in a green space and put anything in there. And a lot of it looks so believable now. When it first started, it didn't, but now it looks amazingly realistic. And so you see many things. And what does this do? This allows us even more control. And in some ways, you can do a lot more special effects by having shot, on a virtual set, because you can put giant monsters and creatures in there. So virtual sets are even more control for a director and a whole crew than. It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but there's more leeway to do what you want to do. I mean, you can make people fly on virtual sets. You can't. It's harder to do that on a actual set, right? On a soundstage. They'd have, the cables and stuff, and, you got to get rid of those on there. And there could be shadows that could go across a wall from a cable. If someone's like, let's say Superman's flying through a real set and not shot in front of a green screen. Well, that's a little difficult. Actual locations, right? So another setting would be actual locations. So we've got sets, both, sets that are in-person sets and virtual sets. But then we have on locations, like real places. Actual locations are the most common now, especially for exterior shots. But it takes a lot of work to make this happen. You don't have as much control when you're on location, right? You have to light things. The weather may not agree with what you're trying to do. So it's very difficult. So when we're talking about setting, though, really what it's about is you're establishing the idea of the film through the location, through where the characters and the objects in the film are going to interact. And the set can say so much about a film. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is props. So props, figures, we're going to talk about figures, which include props, actors, and costumes. So figure is a term for all those things, and we'll talk about props as the next one. So this is another aspect of mise-en-scene is figures, right? They're involved in the physical spaces. They can include, all these things, costumes, props, actors, but they can also include like architecture, trees, plants. People don't think of trees as a prop, but they are. Anything that comes in front of the camera that is in a scene, especially if it's used, then it's a prop. All right, here's Johnny Depp. Speaking of Johnny Depp again, I got a GIF there for you. So this is, maybe you've seen this, Sweeney Todd, right? So this is his... this is an important part, right? Significant object, right? So if we talk about props in particular, they're short for properties, by the way. They're used by the actors that function as part of the story. They give off certain symbolism and a significance, and they can be used to express and classify, their character. Thoughts, feelings can come out of props. So Sweeney Todd's character, he had a special relationship with this knife. So this movie came out in 2007. If you've never, it's a musical. It's been a musical on Broadway, and it's the main. This razor blade is the main prop that he uses, and it defines his character as this, professional in his trade, which is a secret serial killer. Anyways, so here's another example of props. You're probably familiar with these props, right? I'm sure everybody who's in this class has seen this movie. What do these famous props communicate? If you had to think about it, what is Luke Skywalker's lightsaber? It's different than Darth's, his father. It's different than his. Hope I didn't ruin that for anybody. You've got these two battling lightsabers, and their colors are important, right? And this tells us something about these two characters. We know immediately because the visual language that George Lucas has given us that the red ones are the bad ones, the blue ones are the good ones, right? Or the green ones are the good ones, right? So, here's a prop telling us something, visually communicating that words, we don't need to have a sign that says, hey, by the way, the red ones, they're bad. We get it because the bad guys always use the red ones. Remember, these elements can broadly refer to any object in the film's frame, frame, right? So I mean, a prop could be, again, it's it's even the human figures are props. Background characters are props. Pets, right? Animals, right? Horses in the background of a scene are props, essentially. So if we're using the proper terminology, any figure or object or costume, right? Any actor, prop, costume is a figure on there in a movie. So if we talk about actors, now of all these, right, of all the things we're talking about, the human figure in the form of an actor or actress is the most significant object on screen, usually in a movie, right? They're the most important thing that's in the movie. But I want you for a minute to not think about the actors or actresses actually acting, but just think about them as physical objects and how their appearance in a scene or a shot conveys an idea, possibly. In this one on the left, The Life Aquatic, that's a Wes Anderson movie. There's Bill Murray. It's not only Bill Murray, but we've got another figure, which is the whale, right? We got the killer whale behind him in the glass. This is a great scene in this movie, but these figures tell a lot. If you're watching this movie, they're telling a lot about what's going on, and they don't have to say a word. And then the one on the right is from a fantastic movie by Barry Jenkins that came out a couple years ago, won the Academy Award, Moonlight. And one of the key central figures is him he's a kid, and he doesn't have to say anything. And many of the scenes that he's in, they're just these incredible visuals, and what he's doing as a character and how he's shot, and just his figure alone, his being a figure on the screen as an actor, not acting, just being in there. And yes, his facial expressions or whatever, and the scene that's around him, the compositions around him, and the lighting all plays a role. But just through their body language tells you so much, right? And I want you to think about that quite a bit, that actors, it's not just about what comes out of their mouth, right? It's about what they do as well, not just what they say. Think about a movie like this, if you've seen Leo DiCaprio in The Revenant, right? Directors cast certain actors based off if they can portray either archetypes or stereotypes, exaggerations based on generalizations, right? They needed Leo DiCaprio to be this, frontiersman, trapper guy. Okay, we have that in air quotes. You have to be this guy who could live off the land and is, this kind of grizzled veteran of the wild frontier that could live in any kind of situation. We need you to be that. Well, he can't just be that through words, through what he says in his script. He's got to be that through the visuals of his body on the screen. And one of the reasons this movie is so amazing is because his performance, most of it, he's barely saying a word. It's all through his facial expressions, and you see so much emotion and feeling through just how he looks on the screen, how he is as a figure on the screen. He's just like a prop on the screen, but obviously more important. And of course, his costuming is important as well in here. His hair, makeup, all that, what clothes he's wearing are all important. Here's some other examples of costumes. 12 Years a Slave. That was an amazing movie. Came out a couple years ago, Academy Award winner. And then Moonrise Kingdom, another Wes Anderson film. Really fantastic, too. Costumes and makeup go along with the setting, keeping with the authenticity of a film. Keeping with the correct time period means those involved with the creative process of the film. If you're shooting something Victorian era, it better have appropriate Victorian dress for each of the classes of Victorians, right? The upper class, the middle class, the lower class. I mean, it's got to be authentic for you to tell the story correctly. Visually, we are communicating through dress. So you get these slaves, and what they're wearing is a complete contrast to the masters, the slave owners in this movie. And so you're visually communicating just through their dress. So forget what the actors are saying and what they're doing, just their clothes. Moonrise Kingdom is a very period piece set at a certain time in America. And so the clothes had to be really authentic. And in fact, Wes Anderson, the director of Moonrise Kingdom, he goes ultra authentic. His things are almost hyper real. They become surreal because they're almost too authentic in a way. In some ways, it's like, wow, that's even more real than real. But they really can kind of, costume, makeup, and hair. So I'm just going to include all those together. Can make up and convey, a change in character. Symbolic or iconic themes can be produced through costumes and makeup and hair. So really important part. Then we've got something like lighting, right? So if we talk about another term, lighting and color. And in here we've got, Citizen Kane on the left. One of the great movies. Orson Welles directed that. It's an important dimension because it adds depth and complexity to a scene or a shot, creates an overall look or a theme for a particular movie. So Blade Runner on the right, there's an overall theme. It's dystopian Los Angeles in the future. We're in that future now, by the way, I think. But anyways, no, we're not yet, but we're close. It was always raining, so that's not right. But we don't get that much rain here. But if you've ever seen the original Blade Runner and then the new one that came out with Ryan Gosling a couple years ago, you've got, or last year, recently, you've got these very they're lit in a certain way that is almost a character in of itself. So when you're watching films, I want you to watch them for the lighting and what does that lighting communicate to you? How does it tell a story? What words does lighting put into your mind? What could it evoke for you emotionally? Sometimes it's beyond words. Sometimes you can't describe what you're feeling. Here's a famous, this is kind of two famous shots from Raging Bull. This is Martin Scorsese directed this movie. This is like 1980, I want to say. One of my favorite movies of all time. Robert De Niro's on the right, and he's a boxer. He's playing a famous boxer, and just the way that this is lit. And one of the things that Scorsese did was he looked at old Life magazines, these classic Life magazines from, Life magazine was this magazine that was produced and was big, like a big magazine, physically big. And the pictures were ginormous in there. And most of them were black and white, clearly, for the time period, a lot of them black and white. And when Scorsese was coming up with the idea of how he wanted the film to look and feel, he looked at Life magazine as his reference. He wanted the pictures to look like these documentary style, extremely lit, like really bright lit, but also he wanted them to look like police photos from the 30s and 40s, like on the scene photos of the bank robber getting arrested or the person killed on the street. Journalists took these photos with these giant flash bulbs, and they would just have these extreme contrasts in light and dark. So he really wanted that kind of lighting. I'm going to click on this little guy right here, and you can kind of see a little bit of a GIF from that. Kind of cool. With the kind of smoke rising up, the steam rising up off his body, off the ring. Maybe even in the ring, people smoking in the ring, but I think it's steam rising up. But you can see over here, it's really smoky inside the ring. One of the great, and this whole movie's in black and white, and it's so beautifully lit and dramatic, and it really makes you feel. Again, sometimes it goes beyond words. The next one for lighting and color, how about if we talk about color? I bring Wes Anderson up. He's one of our great filmmakers right now. Just like all art forms, color plays an important role in visually communicating themes and ideas. It creates mood and can reveal lots of information that nothing else can. Color can just tell you so much about a scene. And Wes Anderson goes to great lengths to make sure the colors are perfect. In fact, people start doing this kind of thing. Well, they'll do color swatches and catalog the colors. But he does that. When he's creating a film, he's directing it, he comes up with like a color palette for the film. And the whole film has this feel of this color, and it conveys emotions. These colors are the first thing we respond to, I think, as humans. We really react to it. You buy a car a lot of times based on, clothes, based on color, right? Maybe you don't want to stand out too much. You're not going to wear like a hot pink dress. You're not going to drive usually a bright red car. You don't want to get pulled over. So we react to color quite a bit. We love color. We may really like bright red and bright pink, but we don't want to wear it. necessarily, but we may be attracted to it quite a bit. Our eye will go to it first thing. That's why stop signs, right, are red. So this communicating through color is really important in films, and this is kind of where we're going to kind of wrap this up in here. But one important film that kind of used color as opposed to the lack of color was Schindler's List, directed by Steven Spielberg, one of the great films of the 20th century. And of course, it's about the Holocaust. And I'm going to kind of read this quote by Spielberg. This is what he said. If you've never seen Schindler's List, it's one of the most powerful films ever made. You probably will cry if you watch this film. I know I did in the theater. I was like a little baby in the theater. I mean, everybody did, so I didn't feel weird. I mean, literally, I looked around, everybody was bawling, crying. So, here's what he said about this. This is a great quote. He said, America and Russia and England all knew about the Holocaust when it was happening, and yet we did nothing about it. We didn't assign any of our forces to stopping the march towards death, the inexorable march towards death. It was a large bloodstain, primary red color on everybody's radar. No one did anything about it. And that's why I wanted to bring the color red in. So in this movie, the whole movie's black and white, except this one scene with this one little girl. She's walking through the scene with all of these people that are getting ready to march towards their death. And this one girl, this little Jewish girl, has this red coat. The whole movie, I mean, it's startling. You're like watching this black and white movie, and then all of a sudden there's this one spot of color in it. And she's got this red coat on. First of all, it's like, how did they do that situation? You know, how did that happen? Painstakingly, I'll tell you. But it was just amazingly brilliant. It was beautiful. And it spoke more than that visually communicated more than any words. I mean, I love what Spielberg said about it, but so the red of the blood and whatever, like the blood's on all of us. But she just became then to symbolize, you know, the inadequacy that I mean, everybody let it go. Everybody let this go until it was too late. And, you know, 5 to 8 million people got killed in the Holocaust. And so it was just this amazing thing. And that's what film can do. Kind of like photography, it can have this real power, right? And in some ways, film is kind of, you know, the highest of all arts because it kind of brings all of communication together. It brings sound and picture together. And actors are saying words, so it brings all of the arts together, writing, sound, picture. So film is a pretty incredible way to visually communicate. If you think about how we've gone from, you know, rock drawing, you know, rock cave paintings, to making the kind of films that we make. Human beings have come a long way in the how many ever, 40, 50, 60,000 years we know that we've been on the planet, maybe more. But human beings have come a long way in the way we communicate, and we've always needed to communicate. And we've talked about that in this class, is that, we've talked about the ways that we communicate and how we communicate. And it's, for some reason, humans need to do it. I don't know if we really know why. It's something wired into us. And it can be such an amazing thing. It can also be a bad thing. We can communicate to each other, and it can be terrible. We see that around us all the time too. So anyway, I don't want to get too deep on us, but that's our lecture for lecture 14. And this week in the module, you're going to be doing a discussion, and read through the discussion. I want you to pick a scene from a film that means something to you. And I want you to talk about it. So you'll read the discussion and you'll kind of get where I'm going on it. But I want you to think in your mind, now that you've seen this lecture, about some movies that have meant a lot to you. And visually, usually that's what sticks with us quite a bit, is the visuals. We'll watch a movie and years later, you'll remember the visuals of it. You won't remember exactly what the character said, but you'll remember the visuals of it. Like, think about like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? I always remember the car going out the window, right? They got the Porsche, the dad's Porsche, in the beautiful garage with the glass window, and the car goes out and, crashes through the glass and lands in the ravine below. I don't remember what was said in that scene. I don't remember what the sound was like, but I remember the visuals. Right? And so that's what I want you to do for your discussion, is to talk about visuals in a scene. And that's what we're going to do for this module this week, is I really want us to have a nice discussion, and everybody chime in on each other's discussion. That'll be great too. All right, so that's been lecture number 14, the visual language of film, some of the terms that you'll use when you're talking about how film kind of is made. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.